Pokemon is the most successful game franchise in the world. Over 238 million copies of the main series games have been sold. The anime has over 1,000 episodes. There's tons of spin-off games and merchandise. But what if I told you the games might be underperforming? That Pokemon might be dethroned? Well, stay tuned as we go into extra detail on not so obvious truths about Pokemon. You've probably heard that Pokemon games are selling well, and the data proves this. Then why are people complaining so much? 2 words. Game quality. All Pokemon games are exactly the same, except for Legends Arceus, which means we now have 9 generations of the same game, where you fight a bunch of trainers to earn the right to fight even more trainers, and fans want more. Let's look at Sword and Shield as an example. Ads showed that these games had an open area that fans hoped would actually change the game. Spoiler alert, it didn't. We got a half-made, disappointing world that didn't fill the cities or make a proper open area. Sure, it existed, but it was basically a patch of wild Pokemon that you couldn't catch if they exceeded the level cap anyways. How is this even close to open? And the most recent games were worse, making people question Nintendo's reputation for well-polished games. But maybe the worst example is the Diamond and Pearl remakes. Diamond and Pearl were the first Pokemon game for many fans, thanks to the widely successful Nintendo DS, and the remakes were released on the 15th anniversary of these games. Expectations were high, and what did we get? A literal copy-paste of the original games, which is awful considering that all the content in Pokemon Platinum, the upgraded version of these games, were completely cut out. What were they thinking? Well, let's look at some press releases. In 2014, Japanese data analysis company MediaCreate reported that the age of Pokemon players was steadily increasing, and you can see that while Diamond and Pearl lean heavily towards children under the 4th grade, 4 years later, the age spread had evened out for gamers up to 20 years old for Pokemon Black and White. And Nintendo was aware their customers were growing up. Black and White targeted adults and had a darker story. And the main antagonist is a boy who grew up among abused Pokemon, which made him hate people and fight for Pokemon's freedom. That's pretty dark for a children's series. And sales look okay, until you notice one thing. This was the only generation to release 2 direct sequels, meaning it had the least sales per game. So Game Freak decided to never make a game for adults again. Pokemon X and Y went back to a generic storyline and even made the game easier. Pokemon leveled up faster and ridiculously powerful Mega Evolutions were introduced, making it clear that Pokemon's target audience was back to pre-adolescent children. And Pokemon Sun and Moon kept these simplicities and even made the game's theme brighter, with players enjoying a light-hearted trip through chill islands. Most recently, they even changed the anime's protagonist after 25 years, clearly showing that they wanted to appeal to a new audience. But here's the irony. Nintendo's 2017 IR report says they have seen that the ratio of players in their 20s and 30s has risen for Pokemon Sun and Moon compared to past Pokemon titles for Nintendo 3DS. So even though they've tried so hard to appeal to their younger audience, they have an adult fan base that's becoming bigger and more difficult to ignore. Let's go back to the sales one more time. If Game Freak has both adult fans and new younger fans, then shouldn't sales be at a record high with each new generation? Well, at least Generation 8 seems to do this. Actually, Pokemon Legends Arceus is technically not a traditional Pokemon game, because you hunt down Pokemon and fight Pokemon bosses. And if you look at it this way, it's kinda 2 generations in one. So these sales aren't as great as they look either, especially considering that the Switch is a very popular console. And what about remake sales? Let's go back to the questionable Diamond and Pearl remakes. Surprise! Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are actually the best-selling remakes. So was it nostalgia? Maybe younger players were curious, and you might be thinking that Game Freak has an excuse for making the remakes like this. Maybe they didn't have enough time to work on it. Actually, these games were developed by ILCA, the company that made Pokemon Home, so Game Freak wasn't even directly involved. Anyhow, the biggest problem from a fan's perspective is that these low-budget efforts are working. Scarlet and Violet are doing almost as good as Sword and Shield, even with the awful state they were released in. So what's to stop Game Freak if these numbers are growing? Apparently they're doing things right from a business perspective, if not from a fan's perspective. And it's a shame because there's so many things that make Pokemon a great franchise. And it's not like Nintendo doesn't know what the people like. When the cute Pachirisu won the 2014 Pokemon World Championships, it was a symbolic moment that everyone loved. It was everything that Pokemon stood for, not going for what's best on paper, but what you like. And Pachirisu's victory was the actual embodiment of this. Nintendo was elated, and the 2 main directors, Shigeru Omori and Junichi Masuda, themselves flew to South Korea and gave out autographs. And Nintendo honored this moment again by showcasing Pachirisu in the 2022 World Championships intro video. So what is Game Freak thinking? Personally, I think they're stretching things thin. Game Freak's official website says that they have a total of 169 employees as of March 2022. You're probably thinking, Well, they make a lot of money, so they should hire more people. Actually, their homepage also mentions that I have a strong desire to develop with a small number of highly motivated people. So that's that. But there's one other thing, something you may have never heard about. Game Freak's development team isn't fully committed to the Pokemon series. If you look at the exact same page, you can see another message that reads, "From these two development departments, something only Game Freak can create." That's right, Game Freak has another development team that focuses on things completely unrelated to Pokemon. The Gear Project. They've been releasing games regularly, although they haven't been very successful. Most recently, they've announced Project Bloom, a AAA adventure game that will be published by Take-Two in a few years. And Pokemon is actually their second development team, meaning the Gear Project is Game Freak's first priority. I have two questions. First of all, why is the publisher for this new game Take-Two and not Nintendo? And the other Gear Project games weren't massive AAA games, so why now? Here's my theory. When you ask the question, who owns Pokemon, there is no clear answer. While the Pokemon Company does handle everything related to Pokemon, it's actually a joint venture among Nintendo, Creatures, and Game Freak. And nobody knows exactly who owns how much, but it's been assumed that Nintendo owns a majority. And this is kinda supported by the order the companies are listed. And if that's true, then these numbers actually make sense. Out of a total of $121 billion, games make up only 22%. What if Game Freak is getting the short end of the stick? The money is probably split with Nintendo, and they probably get almost nothing for the spin-off games. Maybe they feel like they're not benefiting enough from Pokemon, and maybe that's why Game Freak has decided that they want to branch out and away from Pokemon, going full throttle this time. Which leads us to the title of the video. Pokemon is in a weird spot. A really weird spot. On one side, you got a really big fan base that spans generations, and these fans are upset with the quality of recent Pokemon games, but they still love Pokemon enough to keep buying them. On the other side, you have a game studio that's treating Pokemon like a side project, a cash cow, and trying to do something new. How long will fans take this? And will Game Freak eventually let Pokemon go for something better? But hey, that's just a theory. Wrong channel. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Stay tuned for videos on these upcoming topics.